within Sukhoi numbers. The Tsar bomber detonated at 11:32, or 11:33. USGS earthquake monitors list the event as occurring at 11:33 and 31 seconds. 44, Moscow time on the 30th of October 1961 over the Matyashika Bay nuclear testing range, Sukhoi numbers Zone C, at a height of 4,200 m, 13,780 feet, ASL, 4,000 m, 13,123 feet, above the target, 8:32:40. Some sources suggest 3,900 m, 12,795 feet, ASL and 3,700 m, 12,139 feet, above target, or 4,500 m, 14,764 feet. By this time the 295V had already escaped to 39 km, 24 mi, away, and the 216 53.5 km, 33.2 mi, away. When detonation occurred, the shock wave caught up with the 295V at a distance of 115 km, 71 mi, and the 216 at 205 km, 127 mi. The 295 dropped 1 km, 0.62 mi, in the air because of the shock wave but was able to recover and land safely. 42, according to initial data, the Tsar bomber had a nuclear yield of 58.6 Mount, 245 pj, significantly exceeding what the design itself would suggest, and was overestimated at values all the way up to 75 Mount, 310 pj. The Tsar bomber's fireball, about 8 km, 5.0 mi, wide at its maximum, was prevented from touching the ground by the shock wave, but reached nearly 10.5 km, 6.5 mi, in the sky. The altitude of the deploying bomber. Although simplistic fireball calculations predicted it would be large enough to hit the ground, the bomb's own shock wave bounced back and prevented this. 45. The 8 km wide, 5.0 mi, fireball reached nearly as high as the altitude of the release plane and was visible at almost 1,000 km, 620 mi, away. 46. The mushroom cloud was about 67 km, 42 mi, high. 47, nearly 8 times the height of Mount Everest, which meant that the cloud was above the stratosphere, and well inside the mesosphere when it peaked. The cap of the mushroom cloud had a peak width of 95 km, 59 mi, and its base was 40 km, 25 mi, wide. 48. A Soviet cameraman said the clouds beneath the aircraft and in the distance were lit up by the powerful flash. The sea of light spread under the hatch and even clouds began to glow and became transparent. At that moment, our aircraft emerged from between two cloud layers, and down below in the gap a huge bright orange ball was merging. The ball was powerful and arrogant like Jupiter. Slowly and silently it crept upwards. Having broken through the thick layer of clouds, it kept growing. It seemed to suck the whole earth into it. The spectacle was fantastic, unreal, supernatural. 45. Test results. The explosion of Tsar bomber, according to the classification of nuclear explosions, was an ultra-high power low-air nuclear explosion. The flare was visible at a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers, 620 mi. 49. It was observed in Norway, Greenland and Alaska. 15. The explosion's mushroom cloud rose to a height of 67 kilometers, 42 mi. 14. The shape of the hat was two-tiered. The diameter of the upper tier was estimated at 95 kilometers, 59 mi. The lower tier at 70 kilometers, 43 mi. The cloud was observed 800 kilometers, 500 mi, from the explosion site. 15. The mushroom cloud of Tsar Bomba seen from a distance of 161 km, 100 mi. The crown of the cloud is 65 km, 40 mi, high at the time of the picture. Source: Rosatom State Corporation Communications Department, the 20th of August, 2020. The blast wave circled the globe 3 times, 15, with first one taking 36 hours and 27 minutes. 50. A seismic wave in the Earth's crust, generated by the shock wave of the explosion, circled the globe 3 times. 49. The atmospheric pressure wave resulting from the explosion was recorded 3 times in New Zealand. The station in Wellington recorded an increase in pressure at 21:57 on the 30th of October, coming from the northwest, at 07:17 on the 31st of October, from the southeast, and at 09:16 on the 1st of November, from the northwest, all GMT, with amplitudes of 0.6 bar, 0.60 HPA, 0.4 bar, 0.40 HPA, and 0.2 bar, 0.20 HPA. Respectively. The average wave speed is estimated at 303 m/s, 990 ft/s, or 9.9 degrees of the Great Circle per hour. 51. Glass shattered in windows 780 km, 480 mi, from the explosion in a village on Dixon Island. 15. The sound wave generated by the explosion reached Dixon Island, but there are no reports of destruction or damage to structures even in the urban-type settlement of Andama, which is much closer, 280 km, 170 mi, to the landfall. 52. Ionization of the atmosphere caused interference to radio communications even hundreds of kilometers from the test site for about 40 minutes. 53. Radioactive contamination of the experimental field with a radius of 2-3 kilometers, 1.2-1.9 mi, in the epicenter area was no more than 1 milliroentgen/hour. The testers appeared at the explosion site 2 hours later. Radioactive contamination posed practically no danger to the test participants. 15. All buildings in the village of Seveny, both wooden and brick, located 55 kilometers, 34 mi, from ground zero in the Sukhoi numbers test range, were destroyed. In districts hundreds of kilometers from ground zero, wooden houses were destroyed, stone ones lost their roofs, windows, and doors, and radio communications were interrupted for almost 1 hour. One participant in the test saw a bright flash through dark goggles and felt the effects of a thermal pulse even at a distance of 270 kilometers, 170 mi. The heat from the explosion could have caused third-degree burns 100 kilometers, 62 mi, away from ground zero. A shock wave was observed in the air at Dixon Settlement 700 kilometers, 430 mi, away. Wind opens were partially broken for distances up to 900 kilometers, 560 mi. 54. Atmospheric focusing caused blast damage at even greater distances, breaking windows in Norway and Finland. 55. Despite being detonated 4.2 kilometers, 3 mi, above ground, its seismic body wave magnitude was estimated at 5.05. 25. 42. 45. Reactions. Immediately after the test, several United States politicians condemned the Soviet Union. Prime Minister of Sweden Tage Erlander saw the blast as the Soviets' answer to a personal appeal to halt nuclear testing that had sent the Soviet leader in the week prior to the blast. 56. The British Foreign Office, Prime Minister of Norway Einar Gerhardsen, Prime Minister of Denmark Viggo Kampmann and others also released statements condemning the blast. Soviet and Chinese radio stations mentioned the U.S. underground nuclear test of a much smaller bomb, possibly the Mink test, carried out the day prior, without mentioning the Tsar Bomba test. 57. Consequences of the test. The creation and testing of a superbomb were of great political importance. The Soviet Union demonstrated its potential in creating a nuclear arsenal of great power. At that time, the most powerful thermonuclear charge tested by the United States was 15 Mount, or Castle Bravo. After the Tsar Bomba test, the United States did not increase the power of its own thermonuclear tests and, in 1963 in Moscow, the treaty banning nuclear weapon tests in the atmosphere, outer space and underwater was signed. 15. The scientific result of the test was the experimental verification of the principles of calculation and design of multistage thermonuclear charges. It was experimentally proven that there is no fundamental limitation in increasing the power of a thermonuclear charge. However, as early as the 30th of October, 1949, 3 years before the Ivy Mike test which utilized the Teleulam design, 58, in the supplement to the official report of the General Advisory Committee of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, nuclear physicists Enrico Fermi and Isidor Isaac Rabi observed that thermonuclear weapons have unlimited destructive power. 59, 60, in the tested specimen of the bomb, to raise the explosion power by another 50 Mount, it weighs enough to replace the lead sheath with uranium-238. As was normally expected. 35. The replacement of the cladding material and the decrease in the explosion power were motivated by the desire to reduce the amount of radioactive fallout to an acceptable level, 15, and not by the desire to reduce the weight of the bomb, as is sometimes believed. The weight of Tsar Bomba did decrease from this, but insignificantly. Uranium cladding was supposed to weigh about 2,800 kilograms, 6,200 pounds. The lead sheath of the same volume based on the lower density of lead is about 1,700 kilograms, 3,700 pounds. The resulting relief of just over 1 ton is weakly noticeable with a total mass of Tsar Bomba of at least 24 tons and did not affect the state of affairs with its transportation. The explosion is one of the cleanest in the history of atmospheric nuclear tests, the unit of power. The first stage of the bomb was a uranium charge with a capacity of 1.5 Mount, 35. Which in itself provided a large amount of radioactive fallout. Nevertheless, it can be assumed that Tsar Bomba was relatively clean. More than 97% of the explosion power was provided by a thermonuclear fusion reaction, which does not create a significant amount of radioactive contamination. 61. A distant consequence was the increased radioactivity accumulated in the glaciers of Novaya Zemlya. According to the 2015 expedition, due to nuclear tests, the glaciers of Novaya Zemlya are 130 times more radioactive than the background in neighboring areas, including contamination from the tests of the Tsar Bomba. 62. Andrei Sakharov was against nuclear proliferation, and played a key role in signing the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty. Sakharov became an advocate of civil liberties and reforms in the Soviet Union. In 1973 he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and in 1974 was awarded the Prix Mondial Sino del Duca. Won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1975, although he was not allowed to leave the Soviet Union to collect it. His wife Yelena Borna read his speech at the acceptance ceremony. Analysis. The Tsar Bomba is the single most physically powerful device ever deployed on Earth, the most powerful nuclear bomb tested and the largest human-made explosion in history. 63. For comparison, the largest weapon ever produced by the U.S., the now decommissioned weakly noticeable with a total mass of Tsar Bomba of at least 24 tons and did not affect the state of affairs. Total destructive radius superimposed on Paris with the red circle indicating the area of total destruction, radius the statements condemning the blast. Soviet and Chinese radio stations mentioned the U.S. underground nuclear test of a much smaller bomb.